Hello everyone, it's Magic Monday and today we will be taking a look at the very old dual decks. Today it's Beatdown. Beatdown was my very first dual deck set, and as you may or may not see, it is very used. It isn't near mint at all. That's because I used this a lot back in the days. Alright, so basically there were two decks in here. Blue black and red green, and the main cards that were used as a promotion for this dual deck on the front of the boxes in the advertisement and such were Sengir Vampire and Anam Jin. Now then, let's take a look at the blue cards. First of all, we have Air Elemental. Now let me remind you, this is from the year 2000. So these are old cards. Old art, old style, just the way I like it. Air Elemental, it's 5 mana flying, 4/4. It's a solid creature for the decks. If you just stick to the decks, this is quite a nice creature. Blizzard Elemental, 5/5 for 7 mana, flying, untap Blizzard Elemental. This is quite a nice card to have as well in your deck. The Brainstorm, yeah, awesome with the old art. It's too bad they are all white bordered, but yeah. It was a way to show players that these cards were actually meant as a starting thing. Just like the core sets, they used to be white bordered as well, to say, hey, these are all for starters. Well, okay, that's cool. So Brainstorm, 1 mana, instant, draw 3 cards, then put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library in any order. Who doesn't know this card? Cloud Djinn. Now this is the set where I started to fall in love with genies. Genies being spirits that inhabit, that were captured, let me phrase that right, that were captured in items such as a ring, a lamp, a bottle, and such. These are the creatures from the Arabian Nights, and I love them. These were my first objects when I started collecting the game. So, Cloud Djinn, it's 6 mana 5/4, flying, and it can only block creatures with flying. Just like the original Djinns from the stories, these all had a drawback. So in this case, you can only block creatures with flying. We have the Cloud Elemental, it's 3 mana 2/3 flying, which can only block creatures with flying as well. It can be quite a nuisance actually. Counterspell, 2 mana, simple counter target spell. I don't like the art. This is the Ice Age art, the 5th edition art. Well, I think it's Ice Age. I don't really like the art. I love this card. This was a card printed plenty of times back in the days when Counterspell wasn't considered overly powerful. These days we have the stupid cancel. I really don't like that one. Fog Elemental. It's a 4/4 for 3 mana flying. Back in the days, 3 mana for a 4/4 flyer. That was considered amazing. But when it attacks or blocks, you have to sacrifice it at the end of combat. We have Gaseous Form, 3 mana. Enchant creature, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to and dealt by enchant creature. Giant Crab, 5 mana. 3/3. For 1, it can be the target of spells or abilities this turn. Impulse. This card has an errata on it. I don't know if it's this version or the original version or another version, but one of those has an errata on it. So it's 2 mana instant. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. Put one of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library. I believe this is the correct version. The other version said shuffle it afterwards. After you have to put it on the bottom, so that doesn't make any sense. I believe this is the correct one. Killer Whale, 5 mana 3/5. For 1 mana it gains flying, so it leaps out of the sea and eats the bug. Leviathan, very powerful card back in the days. It is 9 mana for a 10/10 trample. When it comes into play tapped, and it doesn't untap during your untap step. Now, how do you untap it? At the beginning of your upkeep, you may sacrifice 2 islands, and if you do, you can untap it. Now it can't attack either, unless you sacrifice 2 islands. This is meant as a finisher, rather than a regular creature. Mahamoti Djinn. Ah, another Djinn. It is a Djinn without a drawback. It is flying, 5/6 for 6. Power Sink, 1 mana and X, an instant counter target spell unless its controller pays X. If he or she doesn't, that player taps all lands he or she controls and empties his or her mana pool. Yeah, so you decide what he pays. If he has 6 mana, just pay 7. And he has to tap them all. Snapping Drake, 3/2 flying for 4 mana. Solarian Wind, 2 mana instant. Discard your hand and draw that many cards. Nice way to get rid of those nasty, can only block flying cards. Vigilant Drake, 5 mana, 3/3 flying. For 3 you can untap it. Wayward Soul, 4 mana, 3/2 flying. And for 1 blue you can put it on top of your library. Now, as you can see, a lot of these cards have flying. That was the way blue was back in the days. Very fly related. Alright, we go to black. Bone Harvest. For 3 mana and instant, put any number of target creature cards from your graveyard on top of your library. Draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. Cool. Coercion. 3 mana, sorcery. Look at your target's opponent's hand and choose a card from it. That player discards that card. I don't know where... Do they still print these cards? There was a time where almost every block had a card that was Coercion. Dark Ritual. Oh, how I miss you. It's for 1 mana and instant. Add 3 black mana to your mana pool. But it's abusive as hell. Deathstroke. 2 mana, sorcery, destroy target tapped creature. I often played with this card. It's a fun card. Diabolic Edict. 2 mana. Target player sacrifices a creature. Here you can see Graven Ilvek throwing Vati Ildal from the ship. The airship from Graven Ilvek. Because he was considered a traitor or a failure, as the flavor text tells us. And then he died. Drain life, X, and 2 mana. 1 is black and 1 is colorless. Spend only black mana on X. Drain life deals X damage to target creature or player. You gain life equal to the damage dealt, but not more life than the player's life total before drain life dealt damage or the creature's toughness. Wow, that's a lot of text for a simple card like that. Fallen Angel. With the old art. I like the old art where the wings are cut off. 5 mana, 3/3. Supposed to be the opposite of Sarah Angel. Flying. Sacrifice a creature. Fallen Angel gets +2/+1 until end of turn. Feral Shadow. 3 mana, 2/1 flying. Gravedigger. 4 mana, 2/2. When it comes into play, return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Hollow Dogs. 5 mana, 3/3. Whenever Hollow Dogs attacks, it gets +1/+0 until end of turn. And here is the first one of the special cards with alternate art. Sengir Vampire. Sengir Vampire is 5 mana, 4/4 flying. And when a creature dealt damage by Sengir Vampire this turn is put into a graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on Sengir Vampire, so he sucks them dry. I love this art. Look at the horror in the face of the man fleeing, or the female, I don't know. This card is one of my favorites, one of my favorite black cards. I really love this card. Maybe because the person I learned Magic the Gathering from played 4 Sengir Vampires in his deck. Skittering Horror. 3 mana, 4/3. When you play a creature spell, sacrifice Skittering Horror. Very nice if it's the only creature you have. This is exactly the same, but it is flying and it is 2 mana, 3/2. But you also sack it when you play a creature. Tar Pit Warrior. 3 mana. When Tar Pit Warrior becomes a target of a spell or ability, sacrifice Tar Pit Warrior. 3/4. Tador. Tador. 2 mana, instant, destroy target non-artifact, non-black creature. It can be regenerated. Back in the days we didn't have murder, we had Tador. Tador was amazing. Okay, so this was the first deck. Now we get to the second deck. Balduvian Horde to start off with. This is actually printed as a promo as well for the Worlds 1996. It is 4 mana, 5/5. When it comes into play, sacrifice it unless you discard a card at random from your hand. Symbolized barbarism. Ball Lightning, one of my favorite red cards to play with. It's a 6/1 for 3 mana, trample and haste, and at the end of the turn you sack it. So you just play it and goes back. Bloodrock Cyclops, 3 mana, 3/3, it attacks each turn if able. Fireball, yeah, it costs X and Y for 1 red. So it deals X damage. So first you pay for the damage you want to do. Divide it evenly, round it down among Y plus 1 target creature and or player. So if you want to target 2 creatures, you pay 1 for Y. And of course, the X is the damage you want to do, but it is divided evenly over all the targets. So if you want Y to be 4 targets, then it divides the damage in 4. Still with me? Yeah. Hulking Cyclops, 5 mana, 5/5, it can't block. Curd Ape, very powerful card. It has been reprinted in Eternal Masters, I saw. It is 1 mana, 1/1, and it gets +1/+2 as long as you control a forest. This was a very good card back when Magic was still young. Lava Axe. It is 5 mana and it simply deals 5 damage to target player. Catch, it says. Lightning Bolt. Very wanted red card. 1 mana instant, deals 3 damage to target creature or player. Way better than Shock, of course, which only deals 2. Lowland Giant, 4 mana, 4/3, does nothing else. Raging Goblin, 1 mana, 1/1 haste. Very simple. Sheevan Dragon, very popular card back in the days. 6 mana, 5/5 flying, and for 1 it gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Ah, Shock, there it is, the one we just talked about. 1 mana, shocks you for 2. That's why the Ravnica lands, which come into play tapped or you pay 2 life to untap them, are called Shock lands. Sonic Burst, 2 mana. As an additional cost to play Sonic Burst, discard a card at random from your hand and deals 4 damage to target creature or player. Taurum Minotaur, 4 mana, 3/3, haste. Thunderbolt, 2 mana, choose 1. Thunderbolt deals 3 damage to target player. Or Thunderbolt deals 4 damage to target player creature with flying. Thundering Giant, 5 mana, 4/3, haste. Vashino Warrior, 4 mana, 4/2. Now we get to the green cards. These were all quite basic, quite simple, a lot of haste, a lot of burn, a lot of regular creatures that do nothing. Crash of Rhinos, 8 mana, 8/4, trample. Crashing Boars, 5 mana, 4/4. When Crashing Boars attack, defending player chooses an untapped creature he or she controls. That creature blocks Crashing Boars this turn, if able. Boars ruin a party. Boars ruin a party, boars are party to ruin. That's a nice play on word. Deadly Insect from Acadian Masks and Alliances. 5 mana, 6/1. Can be the target of spells or abilities. It's good for a one-time block. And here is the second poster boy of the set, Urnam Jin. Printed back in Arabian Nights, reprinted in Chronicles, and later, after this set, in Judgment. I don't know why, but it's an awesome, awesome Jin. And this shows that the genies have a negative effect to you as well. So it is 4 mana, 4/5, and at the beginning of your upkeep, target non-wall creature an opponent controls gains Forest Walk until your next turn. Now you can imagine you have to pay green, so you probably have a forest. That sucks. Fog, instant, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn for 1 mana. Force of Nature, 6 mana, 8/8, trample. At the beginning of your upkeep, Force of Nature deals 8 damage to you unless you pay 4. Giant Growth, a 1 mana, +3/+3 instant. Llanowar Elves, for 1 mana, 1/1, you tap it for 1 green. Classic card. Plated Spider, 5 mana, 4/4, it may block as though it had flying, so it has reach in modern language. Quarian Elves, for 2 mana it has a 1/1, you can choose a color when it comes into play, and it taps for either one, so either green or the color of your choosing. You can of course choose green, if you want to. Rampant Growth, 2 mana, We saw this last week in the Commander deck. Search your library for a basic land card and put it into play. Tapped. And shuffle your library. Scaled Worm, 8 mana, 7/8. Does nothing. Shambling Strider, 6 mana, 5/5. And for red and green, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Wild Growth, it's an enchant land for 1 mana. When the enchant land is tapped for mana, its controller adds green to his or her mana pool. Woolly Spider, it's a 2/3 for 3, and it has reach. Whenever Woolly Spider blocks a creature with flying, Woolly Spider gets +0/+2 until end of turn. Yavimaya Worm, a 6/4 for 6 mana with trample. Okay, multicolor cards. There were a couple of these in there, I believe 2. First of all, we have Diabolic Vision. It is blue and black. It was printed in Ice Age, and it's a sorcery. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. Put one of them into your hand and the rest on top of your library in any order. Then we have the Segmented Worm for 5 mana, 5/5. It is green and it is red. Whenever Segmented Worm becomes the target of spell or ability, put a -1/-1 counter on it. And then we get to the artifacts. This one is actually a misprint. It is a misprint that it doesn't have flying on it. The original had flying on it, but this one hasn't. And there are no cards from this set which have flying, so it is a misprint, but it's not very special, since everyone had that. It is 5 mana for a 0/4, so it has flying. It comes into play with 4 +1/+0 counters on it, and it can't have more than 4 of them. At the end of combat, if Clockwork Avian attacked or blocked this turn, remove a +1/+0 counter from it, and for X you can put some counters on him. Now we have the same concept, but for Clockwork Beast. It is 6 mana for a 0/4, and it comes into play with 7 +1/+0 counters, and it can't have more than 7. Now for the lands, we have Dwarven Ruins. It comes into play tapped, it adds for red, and it sacrifices for 2 red. Same concept for black, Aben Stronghold. Same for green, Havenwood Battlefield. Now we have Polluted Mire. It is a cycle land, so it cycles for 2. You may pay 2 and discard this card from your hand and draw a card. Yeah, you could play it as an instant. And it comes into play tapped, and it taps for black. Another cycle land, but for blue, Remote Isle. Cycle land for green, Slippery Karst. Cycle land for red, Smoldering Crater. And then of course the missing blue sack land, Sphelunite Temple. And then of course the basic lands, where there are 4 different arts for each. Oh, 3 actually. 3 different arts for each. Well then, that wraps up today's video. I really hope you like this. And next time I will be showing you something different. I don't know what yet, but let's keep it a secret for until then. Right, see you guys. Bye.